Um, Maybe I'll just start. My name is Conny Huthsteiner. I'm a psychiatrist. I practice medicine and orgonomy here at Psychiatric here in Los Angeles. I grew up here in Los Angeles, but have lived in many other places. I went to medical school in Munich, Germany, and have trained and worked for a long time on the East Coast, trained with Mort Herskovitz for about 15 years, but now live here in the Los Angeles area again, but I'm a Los Angeles native. The reason why I became interested in orgonomy is because I had worked for a period of time as a singer. And afterwards, I participated in a theater workshop where the director of the workshop was giving some orgone therapy techniques that made me burst out crying. And I was going, what did he do? You know, what just happened? And he said, oh, those are Reichian techniques from Wilhelm Reich. I knew his name. My father's a psychiatrist. So I got some books out of the library. The book, his son was sort of our house, but a little biographical book in the Santa Monica Public Library. And I read his life story. And I have to say, I was on leave of absence from UCLA graduate school in filmmaking, partly to make money. And that's why I was singing. And I read this story and I thought, oh my God, this would be an amazing story. How could it even be? I mean, is this true? You know, did this guy really do what he said he did? And at that time, you can go to the next slide. The next slide. Okay, yeah, and I probably have a fair number of slides, so you might have to move them, relatively speaking, quickly, just so you know. The next one is a view of Los Angeles. And the reason why I show it first is because in 1980, when I discovered Reich, we did not yet have, I don't think our gas was lead-free yet. And the smog situation in Los Angeles was truly intense. And we had multiple third-stage smog alerts back then, where nobody could play outside. And when I read that he did this weather work and was able to intervene in this way, I was like, wow, this is true. That's something I need to know. So I went on a tour, so to speak. You can go to the next slide. And I traveled around the United States and went to Rangeley, Maine. I went to Washington, D.C., Philadelphia to meet different people who work with Reich. And I also, before I left on the trip, I built myself an orgone accumulator and had very quickly the experience of a small tumor on my back, a benign tumor, lipoma, a fatty tumor, heating up and disappearing automatic, like, you know, kind of almost immediately. And that was shocking enough to me to think, okay, I've got to check this out. So this is another picture of what Los Angeles looked like more at that time, or actually Reich's lifetime, because the smog across the country was truly considered a profound social problem. Even though there were not the number of people, you know, as there are today, obviously. So the next slide. The very last book that Reich wrote that came to publication was the book called Contact with Space. And this was his description of his attempt to bring rain to Arizona desert, which is obviously not a part of the country. It's easy to influence weather patterns. And there's a copy I have with it torn. It's original, that's why. But at the time I was doing the research, you could not find this book anywhere. And I asked the director of the Wilhelm Reich Trust, Mary Higgins, to see if I get a copy. And she put one in the library. And the librarian told me this is always gone within a week. So I went to the local pharmacy and photocopied every page so I could actually have the data. So go to the next slide. So this is Wilhelm Reich. It's a portrait of him done by Mort Herskovitz, one of his students. And I just think it's a great painting. So I just want to show it. Go ahead. So I wanted to just go again a little bit about orgone energy, otherwise known as life energy or bioenergy. It's considered to be some of the qualities that Reich felt it had to try to explain or understand its function were that it was mass-free, and it's present everywhere, penetrating everything. And then it inherently pulsates. And then in a certain way, it tends to be anti-entropic in that it tends to spontaneously organize or concentrate itself and be attracted to areas of higher energy concentration, actually to a maximum, and then it will lead to the pulsation in which energy is discharged. It also has a very, very strong mutual attraction to water, and it's attracted to and repelled by metallic substances, and it tends to be absorbed by organic substances. and it has a higher activity level in all things that are living. Go to the next slide. Just because it's a complicated topic, I'd say it's related to, but not identical with electricity, magnetism, or gravity. And it has a more complex relationship to nuclear energy. But it is a phenomenon that he associated strongly with static electricity. And in the beginning, I know Reich wondered if was the orgone energy we had on the planet had to do with cosmic rays, possibly. So those were some of his, okay, so next slide. And it can be measured in that it radiates both visually. There is a measurable increase inside the accumulator when a temperature is compared with the outside environment. That's been talked about in other people's lectures. It also influences the activity of an electroscope, which Roberto was trying to elucidate in detail, because that was maybe one of his most important instruments for measuring what we often call static. Reich felt was actually a manifestation of orgone energy activity. And it does affect physiological function in multiple ways, and also people's healing response. It affects pretty clearly the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, what's called the autonomic nervous system, and will tend to induce a parasympathetic or relaxation response in the body. Our autonomic nervous system regulates our heart, our lungs, our blood vessels, blood pressure, most of the unconscious neurological functions that we depend on to live. You can go to the next slide. Okay. I don't know what the next picture is, but let me just go straight to the discussion, a little bit of his weather work in Arizona. He drove there with he drove there in 1954 with this was when he was already facing a lot of legal difficulties with his daughter, his son-in-law, and a couple other associates. And as I said, they wanted to do work to induce rain in the desert environment, since he had already been successfully able to induce rain in Maine, New England, or parts of New England, and influence other weather patterns where obviously it rains kind of anyway, but he wanted to see what could be done in the desert. I hope I'm not skipping over too much information, but the cloudbuster itself, let me go to the next slide, see what I have. This is the cloudbuster, at least this is the photograph of the cloudbuster he used in Arizona. You can see, one of the things I love about Reich is he's incredibly creative when it came to his use of creating names for things and using fascinating things. And even with his logo here of the spiraling wave on his truck, this is also one of his basic concepts that he talks about in his book. I thought that was really sweet. Because this is 1954. So basically they're an array of metal pipes that are up on a large pedestal, and they have pipes, conduits, metal conduits that extend down beneath them that then normally are extended into a body of water. So you could go back to the prior slide. You could, though we're going to discuss the cloudbuster. Okay, so the cloudbuster being this array of metal pipes, hollow metal pipes, they would be put together in a facility, a structure that could rotate or move them around or up and down, and they would be grounded with these metal conduits in water. And since he knew that orgone energy was attracted to metallic substances, he thought through this conduction through the metal pipes and grounding, the metal pipes passively influence the movement of orgone energy. I guess I cut off my screen here. The pipes induce movement. In particular, he was trying to induce movement where there was atmospheric stagnation. Mm-hmm. Now, it's important in his healing work as a psychiatrist, he also was looking for energetic blocks in the body. That's one of the basic principles you have when you're doing psychiatric orgone therapy physically, that there are different regions of the body where people will hold their tension or their energy or their emotional expression. And if that can be released, they'll be restored to a more naturally healthy state. So can you go to the next slide? Go to the next slide. So, as I said, he decided to go to Tucson, and I realized I don't have a lot of slides of Tucson, but it's very, very dry, down by the Mexican border. And what I found when I went to Tucson to read about his results was I had studied all the microfilms in the public library there, because it was the only way you could see newspaper reports from 1954 and 55. And I copied all my notes by hand, because you couldn't, Xerox a microfilm back then. I still probably can't. But I tried to record all the data from the newspapers and compare it to what Reich had written in his book, just to even see if it was valid. Is this really what happened? And it's totally jived with what the different news bureaus were reporting on the weather conditions at the time. And Tucson at the time was in the middle of a 30-year drought cycle. He hadn't seen any rain for about 15 years. And when he started very slowly in the winter, actually late winter, by trying to simply induce humidity into the area, which is something very unique to cloud busting, and not cause rain to fall, but simply allow the atmosphere and the physical environment to get accustomed to having moisture. Because if rain falls too quickly, you'll have runoff and erosion, and the earth won't be prepared, so to speak, to absorb the extra moisture. So he worked for at least 4 months, maybe it was 5. And I think the next picture is Saguro. He actually did get snow in the winter in December. So there was a bunch of snow. So slowly people were able to ski that year, which is very exciting for a lot of the residents, actually.
In Tucson.
Yeah. And they do apparently have mountains that ring the city. So in any case, as the months progressed, it was very difficult to influence the weather there compared to Maine, quite understandably. As I said, it's very, very dry. And he was looking for areas of atmospheric energetic block. And let me see what the next slide is. I don't totally remember. And he was his orientation to changing the weather was that he was trying to approach the organism as if it's an organism itself, the atmosphere, that with qualities that are very lifelike, that it showed exhibiting pulsation and flow and motion. And he assumed that within the atmosphere or Mother Nature, that there's always this natural striving toward health or balance or equilibrium. So that was his primary goal, is to restore the natural weather functions, not to simply create a rainstorm, but rather try to bring in the rain as it would normally or naturally occur. Maybe the next slide. In classical meteorology, or just when you're reading a lot of weather reports, a lot of people talk about there being high pressure areas or low pressure areas. And in particular, in recent years, it happens very often that there are high pressure blocks, so that a region of high pressure will remain in place for weeks at a time and cause pretty horrible heat waves. And so these blocks, or that atmospheric barriers, as he called them, he strove to unblock them in the desert region by using the device, the Cloudbuster. So anyway, I get into the technology, but what I thought was very interesting about his work, first of all, I did it we're talking in the 1950s, so that access to information nationally in terms of weather status was almost non-existent. We didn't have faxes, even newspaper reporting would have been limited, television use was also quite limited. So he very much felt his environment. He paid very, very close attention to very intimate details of the landscape, the soil, the atmosphere, the mountains, how the rocks are being affected, etc. And so he was looking for energetic blocks that he could identify on the local level, which also he was working on a level that you could say is quite small. In modern meteorology, we don't have even the tools right now to assess very local events, although that's improving over the years. Okay, you can go ahead. Oh, okay. And I'm sorry to maybe bring this in here, but maybe I'll come to something that, okay. The reason why I added this picture is Reich talked a lot about there being we refer to a term DOR, which means deadly orgone, which was his abbreviation for atmospheric orgone energy that had sort of gone awry or that was no longer healthy, that was toxic,
Mm.
and felt that it caused a darkening in the coloration of the sky, and he would see. So this was, I stopped, I pulled off the side of the road because I was looking out over in Oregon. I thought, my God, I've never seen such a clear-cut demonstration of this kind of here, this dark area here.
Yep.
And this white light area down here. But I think even more interesting, you guys maybe remember from Armando's lecture, that he was talking about club cells. They're roundish cells that have kind of a tail that go off them. It's kind of an indicator for cancer. This cell very much reminded me of a cancer cell with that kind of aberrant morphology. So why don't we go to the next slide? Gosh, the image doesn't look like it's quite
Yeah,
amazing.
it is from here. You can see the
Yeah,
distinction.
so that you can really see that dark area quite clearly from there. And that he would, and the brownish area beneath the blue, he would designate that as a door field. And he would really describe it as brown. Now, obviously, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of color pictures from his work. I've never seen them. So everything is written in a book and printed in drawings. So why don't we go to the next slide? Next slide? Yeah, see. Oh, I don't mean to jump ahead, but I guess I am. In any case, I was kind of blown away when I found this all out. And so I tried to find out more information about cloud busting and about Reich and detailed information. This is just a list of some of the other people who've worked to reproduce his efforts. I put James DeMeo at the top because maybe he's done more and published more than most people. He's also a meteorologist by trade. Dick Glasband, Robert McCullough worked with Reich together when Reich was alive. Jerome Eden, I don't know Schleining's work, but Bruno Bici, Roberto has done a tremendous amount of work, really. Charles Kelly, who founded Radix, Trevor Constable, Terry Cook was James' partner, also worked with him very, very closely. Manfred Foucault and others have worked in this Orgone weather engineering. I mean, I think Yorgos was talking about it in his lecture also, that there are people working in Namibia, somebody in Algeria, I know. So I'm just saying this, it's not just Reich's experience alone. So you can go to the next, and by the way, this book was written by Roberto. I wanted to bring a copy, but I left it at home. It's a wonderful summary of people's contributions to the field, specifically in weather modification, which you can buy. Yeah. So you go to the next one. Well, this is a picture of James DeMeo with his cloudbuster after working in the bush in August 1998. You see some of the people there were a couple of people. It's Terry Cook, Aurelio Albini, Carlo Albini, and Bern Senf. Bern is also referenced in somebody else's lecture today. He's worked hard in Orgonomy in Germany for a long time. Okay, next picture. Oh, our hosts. This is Stefan and Bobkin here. And this is Bobkin's pistachio farm. They have a farm. We have our cloudbuster behind. I'm sorry?
Both are good looking.
Both very good looking guys. Very charming too. And they had a good size accumulator. Obviously, this is a very large device. Requires usually several people to operate, just to take the pipes up, down, in, out.
Wow.
And to extend all these coils into the body of water, which was in this case a irrigation pond that Buckley has on his property. So you can go to the next slide. I'm not sure what it is. Oh, and we were doing this in the Central Valley, California, which is near a town called Buttonwillow, where he has his farm. And this is just one picture of the atmosphere. And I believe this was in 2018. We've had more than one operation in that area. So this is what we're looking at, and nothing's going to rain here. And I believe it hadn't for quite some time. The first operation, it had been a long time since it had any rain. And it's a very kind of depressing environment to be in. It feels very heavy and dirty, frankly. So next slide. But after we started operating, the clouds start forming on the horizon, probably that was within a day and a half or 2 days maybe. And that even though we're not that far from these large electric power lines. And do we have a second accumulator, you guys? Yeah, we had two accumulators, two cloudbusters going. And so you go to the next slide. Okay, so I was starting on my way back to Los Angeles, about a 2-hour drive. And the clouds kept on building. And I'm like, oh, I think I need to pull over and take a shot. We're already there for a couple days, so I wanted to get home, kind of. But this was pretty beautiful. So I'm heading toward Los Angeles here. So why don't you take the next slide? Okay, this kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I know for people in this area, they know at this point I had to enter an area called the Grapevine, which is sort of a mountain you have to go over to get out of the Central Valley to come toward Los Angeles. And a major rainstorm hit. And this is all freeway, lots of trucks, lots of traffic. And I did not pull over. I was just hoping I was going to get through this rainstorm safely, because it's very, very steep grade. And everybody's like driving very carefully because it got very dark. So continue on to the next slide. And now I'm back in the Los Angeles area. And so I'm looking back toward the north from my house. And there are mountains behind these clouds, but it was such a remains of the storm, so to speak. It was quite beautiful. And the news did report on the rainfall that night. Yeah.
What month was this?
It was in 2018, and I believe it was October. Yeah. And you can go ahead to the next slide. So, gosh, I don't know why my screener is not fitting. Is there some reason? Because I'm cutting off my words, but it's okay. Reich came upon, pardon? He came upon the discovery of orgone energy and this 4-beat formula while studying the sexual orgasm in his work as a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. And the 4-beat formula, which I guess people have not yet discussed, the situation in which there is a pulsatory function in which mechanical tension or pressure on an organ leads to charge in the periphery of an organ, which then is followed by the third step of discharge of the organ, and then a detumescence or a reduction in the swelling in that physical organ, be it the heart, intestines, or a sexual orgasm. But this change in electrical potential follows that 4-beat formula. And that was for him the tip-off that there was effectively a charging and discharge process that happened biologically with the pulsatory function. And this is very important. Yeah, it's central to the observation that all things living pulsate. And I know I had once worked at a famous lab called the Jackson Lab, Bar Harbor, Maine, and I was telling my old advisor about this work. And she goes, oh no, when a cell stops pulsating, it's dead. They know that. This is what all biologists assume is true. And now that she's working with the mice there, it's a famous lab for genetically controlled mice. She was a senior biologist, wonderful person. In any case, without artificial pulsation created that mimics the pulsation present in the planets, the astronauts can't survive in spaceships. There's a thing called Schumann's resonance, which happens around the planet that they have to induce artificially in the spaceships, or they are not well. Yeah, they can't stay in that space.
7.8.
So without pulsation, rain doesn't fall. So, so what Reich did was create a theoretical framework that integrates our sensory world of perception and consciousness and sensation with our physical planet. That would include our physiology and our metabolic functions. And all of us depend on water and the atmosphere that surrounds us, that pulsates as well. So is it still, you can't get it smaller somehow? With this model, many biological processes can be more easily understood. Oh, and I don't remember what the end of that slide is, I'm sorry.
It's more easily understood.
And something is more easily understood.
Yeah.
Is there some way you can't make it small? Okay. Okay.
This is how you have exported it. Yeah, that's the way.
It goes off in your computer, you can't see. Oh my, I'm sorry. Yeah, I made this on a keynote. Oh well. transferred it to PowerPoint. I guess I'll be more careful next time. Now, I guess I'm bringing us up to the present, more present, let me say. I've been very grateful, and Roberto had come to the United States a couple times to help us with these operations, which was amazing, from Italy. And he was contacted by Emilio De Simone about interest in weather work. And so Emilio has also quite independently done some amazing stuff doing weather work. And so we started trying to work together on some things. And historically, weather work has always been executed with these very large devices that are very heavy. And as I said, demand a larger group of people to operate, are hard to move around, you need to have a body of water, etc. And sometimes, well, for me, I was feeling frustrated because you can't always plan a more expensive operation like that, where you're taking 2 or 3 days off work, hire a bunch of people, go out to a remote area, try to do this. So I thought, gee, if I could figure out some way to make a inexpensive, lightweight model that maybe I could alone, use, that would be really cool. And Emilio, I think, was already doing that. And so we sort of teamed up to, actually they're teaching me more than teaming, but how to do weather work here in California. And I'm showing this slide because Emilio's been doing this for quite some time. And the results we got were, I think, really extraordinarily good for the last couple of years. And this is a picture from a blog. There's a weather blog in Los Angeles called Weather West with a meteorologist named Daniel Swain and a bunch of other meteorologists who talk all day long about what the pressure's like, what's happening in their parts of the state of California. So it's a detailed view of all the weather events from the north to the south of the state, spoken about by different meteorologists. And you read their daily posts and they're like, oh, it's so hot, my God, it's unbearable. Everybody obviously has been very freaked out by all the fires, by all the heat. It's been really horrible. But the last 2 years, maybe even 3, have been increasingly gentle. And except for the Los Angeles fire, which maybe we have had a very, we've basically, the drought no longer exists in the state of California. There was so much rain for a couple of years that all the reservoirs are filled now. And we've had, and this was one of the other people on this blog wrote, oh God, I miss these skies for the first time in 28 years. Just a clean, healthy looking sky. So go ahead, the next one. Next picture. Yeah, one year this was, oh man, I thought it was 2022, and Yosemite actually got snow. And interestingly, we normally don't think about there being snow on the Sierras in the summertime, but in fact, I happened to come upon a kind of firsthand account of the weather in California from 1850, and a bunch of gold diggers were wandering through the state and were blown away by all the snow on the mountains in July. So clearly, at one time, the mountains, the Sierra Nevadas in California, which is in the middle of the state, had plenty of snow in the winter. Yeah. So anyway, next slide. Yeah. So this is from my house, a weather storm that was kind of coming in. And I feel lucky I've got a kind of panoramic view. In the next slide. Yeah. And that's just a downburst down in the San Fernando Valley. But these clouds are just so healthy. You go, oh, these are good thunder rain clouds. So, okay. So, next slide. So sometimes I'd ask myself, people go, well, what do you mean? You're just gonna have these pipes out there and you're gonna somehow make a difference in the weather with these, pipes. I mean, come on, get real. What's that gonna do? You can do it all day long. But you can ask, why would a cloudbuster make such an impact? And I know in psychiatry and biology, we do assume things are all interrelated. And in a sense, if you think about a string and a piece of fabric, if you pull on it, the whole fabric will pull up with it. Yeah, you can't just pull a string and not affect the rest of the fabric. There is also a concept called the butterfly effect, which is this sensitive dependence on initial conditions as part of the chaos theory. So that theoretically broadly spaced meteorological events can be theoretically influenced by a very small event in one location, in other words, the cloudbuster. Yeah. Did you want to ask a question?
I have a question.
You have a quiz?
Question.
Question.
Your cloudbuster
Yeah.
experiment doesn't
Yeah.
have any effect on ozone layer?
We hope it does. I mean, yes, in all likelihood. Honestly, a lot of the parameters that are influenced, I can tell you, it's very obvious that it affects pressure, it affects temperature, it affects wind, it will affect humidity levels. And it definitely affects particulate matter. You know, there are two parameters, 2.5 and 10 parameters for particulate matter. It also, I'm assuming it must be affecting also the nitrous oxide levels. But right now in the arena of smog monitoring, you know, air pollutants monitoring, every time we work, it's relatively complicated because we could be monitoring a tremendous number of parameters. And it's only so many people really have so much time in the day. So I have not studied ozone. Roberto, maybe you know. Does the cloud busting affect the ozone levels? Have you ever monitored the ozone?
Because no one studied this, so we don't know.
We haven't
We
studied.
don't have experience on this,
Right.
so. Possibly it may have an effect on the ozone, but
Right.
there is no evidence for it.
It's not really sure. Okay. And, okay, so next slide. Okay, sometimes I've thought when I think about things, I think, well, how can I explain this to somebody who's more interested in classical science, you know, traditional Western science? And there is a phenomena called piezoelectricity, and it's a generation of electrical charge in certain materials in response to mechanical pressure, stress. Effectively, it's not a form of electricity that's discussed very much, but basically Reich is describing the 4-beat formula. One could conceive, oh, you increase the pressure on an organ, it will develop a charge, it will discharge, and then it's not going to be, it'll detumesce, it will unswell, and the pressure will be reduced. But, and I thought, okay, and the pipes are, you know, grounding and maybe static from the atmosphere, and but why don't we go to the next slide? And also, and there's several books I wanted to kind of bring in some of their ideas from. One of them is a beautiful book called Sensitive Chaos, I think written by a man who just studied water, the qualities of water. And go to the next slide. I think a lot of the work is based on Schauberger and Steiner. And he had diagrams of when you have a river flowing, it will always, you know, flow in a undulating manner. Water will always want to undulate. It never wants to go straight. No matter what you do, if you try to make it straight with like cement walls to a river, it's not going to be a happy river. So, but interestingly, there are streams within a stream. So, and that are separate from each other. So even if you're, and they are themselves spiraling in the water. So can you go to the next slide? And so if you're gonna even do a cross section, let's say of a riverbank, this little circuit is turning around in this direction, going clockwise. And this little cycle of water is revolving counterclockwise. And that's just how rivers go. And and they tend, anyway, so the next slide. Another really interesting phenomena is the vortex. I'm not going to go into great detail, but one of the things I thought was fascinating about it, again, within the vortex, there are different areas of the vortex that rotate at different velocities in relationship to each other. So there's, so to speak, bodies within the body of a vortex, you could say. And interesting also, if you watch them, this little projection from a vortex will pulsate up and down spontaneously. It just does that. It pulsates up and down. So You can, I don't have a picture of it though, I'm sorry. And you can go to the next slide. Yeah. And these are just some pictures of water from that book. These were diagrams of water entering into water. Because normally we think, oh, well, doesn't water just go into water? It all just mixes up, right? You know, it's like, why shouldn't it do that? You know, but in fact, it doesn't just mix up. It will create its own forms within a separate body of water. That I think they used to like dye to identify this. But you see, it will enter practically in a pulsatory fashion and then create spirals along the way. And the next slide. This is just a picture of again, the same process by which water is entering another water stream and dividing itself. Now, sorry, it does look like a penis. So, but the thing is about this book, this book about sense of chaos makes the point that all the water really creates almost all of our morphological structures in the body. It's responsible for the design of our ears, of our bones themselves, of literally all of our body organs, the flowing process that water undergoes. So we can go to the next slide. So anyway, so I just want you all to keep that in mind, because I think it's in and of itself something we don't necessarily take for granted or even know or notice. I know that there was a relatively famous forester in Austria who had some very interesting ideas about water. I wish I could recreate all of them, but one point I remember learning was that if you want a river to not overflow its banks, you need to create an elevated portion in the middle of the river. And the river will go away from the banks and come toward the middle, wherever you've put that elevated portion. And I don't think most people would think of that or even know that to be true. So tell me if I have no idea what my time is. So
You got 3 more hours.
I definitely do. Are you serious? 5 more minutes?
Well, no, 8.
When did I start?
Yeah,
8 minutes.
8.
Okay. Oh, this is hard. Okay. Gerald Pollack, he's a professor up in Seattle. He has written a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, Beyond Solid, Liquid, and Vapor. Go to the next slide. And he says there's actually 4, we think it's always ice, water, and vapor. But in fact, in water, there is a polarization that takes place in the water molecules that creates effectively 2 arenas in any contained water supply. So next slide. And this polarization takes place because a bunch of the water molecules that are supposed to be neutral actually hook up with each other and form a lattice here in this close to the surface. And in doing so, they push out some of the hydrogen ions into the rest of the water. And because they don't need them in order to build their lattice, once they get their lattice built, it's like they're extra. So they get pushed off along with solutes into the adjacent area, which then is positively charged compared to the border itself. So next slide. So this is again a water molecule, oxygen, hydrogen, hydrogen, and usually it's got a kind of funny structure here, it kind of bends a little bit, we know. But it's overall a dipole that kind of one side of the molecule is kind of positive, the other is kind of negative, but it's considered a neutral because it's just a positive, positive, and 2 negatives. Okay, next slide. And this is how hydrogen would bond between these. It's a pretty tight bond here and a small bond between one water molecule and another. Go to the next slide. So when they though all join up, they start joining up with each other and they form a hexagon actually. Oxygen, 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 oxygen. So they form a 6-sided form like a honeycomb. And in doing so, they could get rid of one of their hydrogens because, hey, they're sharing other hydrogens with each other. Yeah, so they're forming a not tight little bond. Go to the next slide. So what happens is that these little hexagons then all group up with each other and they actually form layers. And they don't just form layers, these layers form on top of each other. And they get increasingly thick and increasingly thick and increasingly networked, both up, down, and sideways. so, and this is called easy water. Easy because it's an abbreviation for the word exclusion zone, because in that zone, you will not find any more solutes. Everything gets pushed out of that area because there's only enough room for the water molecule. Go to the next slide. So in this picture, there's a film here, but the zone actually increases in size over time. So it doesn't happen immediately. It's like over a few minutes, over several, okay, and this is also, so over here, he put micro, like little teeny weeny little micro globules in the water. And they all got pushed out because this is the negative zone where they don't tolerate it. So all the microglobules, all the solutes will end up outside of the exclusion zone. And this is the edge. This is the hydrophilic tissue that it's up next to. But when you shine light on this area grows even bigger. Okay, next slide. So this is another image of how there's a zone where none of these little microtubules will go right up next to an edge of naphtha on a test subject. There's a dark area that means that there's no globules in there, and this is the bulk water, which tends to be positive or neutral, and this is a negative charge. Go further. And this again, even let's say you have a surface down here, these exclusion zones that are red, they actually can grow almost filigree-like up from the hydrophilic surface that they are lodged on. So these are all negatively charged sort of growths, you could say, like an icicle or like a crystal. Next slide. And here is you can maybe see it in here. There is no microspheres in here. It's in any case, the next picture. So this is, so the hexagon is the easy shape for water to assume, and that's why our snowflakes end up being hexagonal. Next slide. But very importantly also is that he found that light energy and infrared energy enhance this process of polarization. And the reason why basically they're responsible for creating 24/7 a sort of mini battery in water. And that honeycomb lattice effectively creates our surface tension. Surface tension. So, you can drop things on water, like, if you have something lightweight, it'll just stay there. Or you can even drop something a little heavy, and the surface tension in water will hold something aloft. That is that exclusion zone, that tightly networked mesh-like structure in water. Because infrared light or cosmic rays go all the way down to the bottom of the ocean, he's assuming this subtle ionization polarization process is happening all the time and effectively creating a type of battery. Now, this is a very, very weak battery, maybe 10 millivolts or something like that. I'm not sure what the next slide is, but why don't you go ahead and give it to me? But maybe it is enough to drive a tremendous number of cell functions. He even found that water will spontaneously move through a hydrophilic tube. It doesn't need to have any pressure put on it. It's simply because of the movement of the solutes and of the by the creation of the exclusion zone. So go ahead, next slide. I'm not sure what I did for next one. Okay. So the things that I thought was very fascinating is water is charged by the sunlight and infrared light. And we know that accumulators are also, we're assuming, are being charged by cosmic rays or energy from the atmosphere. And Reich felt that water was a carrier for orgone energy. And that orgone energy is thought to have its origins in the sun and the cosmos, but more, he's come to the conclusion, it's more fundamental to the process of manifestation of matter itself. So water has what seems to be an endless supply of energy, manifesting in its apparent spontaneous, practically spontaneous separation of charges. And Reich always thought, he said in the beginning, water and orgone energy are very, very strongly attracted to each other. He always felt, water is like a carrier for orgone energy. So orgone energy is a source of endless energy, charging up all things living and being carried often in water. So yeah, next 5.
May I
Oh,
say something?
yeah, yeah.
An Arabic saying, it says that all life is from the water.
Yes, well, we wouldn't be able to live here without it, yeah. Another book that this man wrote is called Cells, Gels, and Engines of Life. Actually, he wrote this before the book on water. He writes in more detail about how this ever so slight electric differential influences a tremendous number of our biological processes. Go on, next slide. Oh, and one of the things that he was writing about was cancer. Oh, gosh, and now I have to find the stuff. Okay, because I know I don't have a lot of time. But I thought this was really interesting. This is just a brand new research article he brought out. I think I have a copy here called, and it's a question mark. He's not stating he's sure of this, but he said an unexpectedly critical role of cell water in cancer. And he writes that, cancer cells apparently consistently have a low electrical potential. That they have normal cells usually about 50 millivolts to 100 millivolts. The electrical potential in a cancer cell is only 10 to 15. And he feels that that there's a change in the structure, in fact, of water when a cancer cell becomes cancerous, that is seen in certain nuclear magnetic resonance imaging that they use to, they can look at the water because they notice a change in the water's proton spin. It's also seen in atomic force microscopy. Atomic force microscopy is a new technology by which they're actually looking at atoms on the surfaces of things and can see things that are living. He also talks about the morphological changes that happen in cancer cells, assuming that some of this has to do with simply that there's a lack of charge. And when there's less charge in a cell, this does cause a situation where when a cell becomes depolarized, no longer is charged electrically as it should be, there'll be actually an increased rate of mitosis, which is cell division, which is what we're looking at when we're looking at cancer cells, as cells that are reproducing too quickly. Also, he assumes that toxins and radiation and other carcinogens are possibly damaging all the nucleation sites where the water, these negative exclusion zones would be growing. So he assumes that the DNA is being expelled from the cells, which is what Armando was showing, because they appear empty. The cells have nothing left in them. Cancer cells end up losing their structure. So, and he was discussing the idea that possibly excessive mitosis, in other words, cell division, or the division of the nuclear material in a cell, would be happening in neutral water, in water that doesn't have a charge, more quickly than in charged water, because charged water with the honeycomb structure is rigid. And so that the actual chemical separation doesn't have the space to take place when the cell's charged. Once it doesn't carry a charge, cells can split up as much as they want. There's nothing holding them back. And he did study the effects of a carcinogen, the glycophosphate, which is implicated in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And he says it diminishes the negative charge in water everywhere, in all concentrations. He also tested to see turmeric, holy basil, coconut water, and ghee, and they all increased the amount of easy zone water. But he has not tested this with an Orgone energy accumulator, which I think is a real thing he's missed. But I was very surprised to hear that he knows Yorgos, because Yorgos described him as a very good friend. So I'm assuming they've been talking a bit. So can you go to the next slide? And I have to say, so these are the cancer cells that we were talking about. Okay, then I wanted to show another couple cells. These are the abnormally formed cells with all these bizarre formations. It's supposed to be a nice, tidy rectangular cell with the proper villi. It's supposed to have maybe in intestines or something. Okay, next slide. Okay, I chose a couple of pictures for clouds before I end that are obviously abnormal. And some of the abnormalities, I feel in some ways do feel to some extent like almost like a cancerous process. And this sort of torn tissue-like feeling in a cloud. You see it more often these days. If I go to the next slide. This, I mean, I thought, since when do clouds have like sharp edges? And I'm not even sure anymore what's causing these kinds of aberration, except I can only assume maybe radiative effects of satellites or cell phones, or we have so many satellites in the air anymore, and they're all transmitting information back down from the planet. But I'm not an expert in the radiation technologies that are used for those purposes, so I cannot say for sure. But obviously there's something terribly unhealthy about a cloud that looks like this.
Would chemtrails be?
Well, in this
Contributing.
sky, there is none. So, next slide. Okay, and this little tear here in the middle of a cloud, I'm like, how did that like get torn like a piece of paper in the middle of a piece of tissue? And you see more stuff like that these days. Go ahead to the next slide. Next slide. Oh, here's a weird area. This area is all like torn out here. I also just, again, it had this feeling as if like something very fragile is being torn apart like paper. Next slide. So, hope and vision. I just hope that this science is not lost, but our knowledge is expanded upon, and that our scientific community develop a greater openness to intellectual discussion without premature judgment, and avoid the trap of social condemnation of those who are different. And I guess I missed a sentence there. Different, or simply following a path that is unusual. And that the people who do work, I see why, that they do so engage in such a dialogue with an attitude of open self-awareness and self-reflection, because that's essential to weather work. If you're doing weather work, you have to be very aware of yourself, be very tuned into your own body sensations, how you're perceiving your environment, and you have to put that in as part of your analysis of what's going on. Your subjective impression is essential to weather research. I'm
Just like
assuming.
a good psychiatrist.
Yes, it's like a good schedule, right? And so I'm also hoping that those who do this work do so with a respect for the responsibility involved, and maintain humility and an attitude of service to the greater good throughout. Because obviously there's no other way we can do it successfully. That's very clear. And this quote is from Reich. I always thought it was quite moving, given the fact it's really what he did. Because one often hears of the soldier's commitment to giving his life for his country. One hears little of the scientist's readiness to give his life for what he knows to be the truth. So I think that's it.